much. Our next speaker will tell us about surrogacy, the law. Her name is Robynne Friedman, a surrogacy law specialist. She has assisted over 400 patients, and she became a mother herself through surrogacy. So she's going to be talking about something that she has experienced herself. Robynne Friedman, Surrogacy, the law.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to IFASA for inviting me once again to speak. It's always a privilege. I'm going to touch on the law. Before I get on the legal aspects of surrogacy, I think we need to start at the beginning, and that is, how do I start the whole surrogacy process? This is something that I think most people don't know where to start. How do I begin? How do I gather information? So the first step in the process is to possibly go online and seek out a fertility lawyer or fertility specialist, somebody involved in surrogacy law. You could also go online, look at the various agencies that are involved that give online advice and support. It's also important to realize that a lot of what you read on the internet is actually a lot of nonsense, unfortunately. Don't listen to friends and family about all the horror stories about surrogacy, because I can promise you that might happen in Hollywood movies, but it does not happen in South Africa. We have an incredibly strict legal regime in South Africa. I have spoken at international conferences where they've actually been blown away about how far advanced South African law is with surrogacy. Believe it or not, that legal entities like the United Kingdom are lagging in excess of 15 years behind us with regards to the development of our law. So that's how accomplished South Africa is with regards to their fertility and surrogacy laws. So the best place to start, as I said, is consult with an expert. Speak to people who are in the know. Speak to couples who have been through surrogacy before. I also want to touch on what Louis just said. He made it sound like the legal aspects of surrogacy were an absolute nightmare for them. But you must understand something, that the judges at the end of the day need to make sure that the parents are fit and proper parents. Internationally, what is happening with surrogacy is that many people, believe it or not, are doing surrogacy or seeking out surrogacy clinics for the sole purpose of trafficking children. So you can understand that the judges have a very onerous responsibility to make sure that they do delve into all the legal aspects of the parents. Are they fit and proper parents? Do they have the financial means to take care of a child? Do they have perfect living, decent living conditions? All of these aspects need to be evaluated when you consider the bigger picture, that the aim of the judge at the end of the day is to make sure that this child is coming into the world to fit and proper parents, and that this child is coming into the world without a malice intent of trafficking the child or for other bad reasons. So the first step in the process is, as I said, you source out your professional, and I'm going to run through the procedural aspects of surrogacy so that you can understand how the whole process works. The most difficult part of the surrogacy process is to actually source a surrogate mother. The reason why we struggle to find surrogates is because they really get nothing out of it. These are selfless women who come forward, they offer their bodies for a period of a year or more. They offer their emotions to parents who are generally total strangers to them. It takes a very special type of angel to come and offer such a gift to parents completely selflessly. In America, you get paid a substantial amount of money for being a surrogate mother. You can earn about $40,000 per surrogacy, and that's for a singleton pregnancy. In South Africa, the only thing the surrogate mother does get is the benefit of a medical aid, and that's if she hasn't had a medical aid before. She gets the benefit of life insurance and disability cover. That's essential to make sure that nothing should happen to her during the pregnancy. And it's also important for the parents because at the end of the day, the parents don't want to be sued in the process if, God forbid, something had happened to the surrogate. For example, if she shoots a blood clot or has a stroke during the pregnancy, then at least the parents are insured of the fact that her family will be looked after via the life insurance policy. So the surrogate will only get a small allowance per month, generally between 4,000 to 6,000 rand, to go and buy pregnancy vitamins, maternity clothing, special foods that she requires to eat, but there's no money involved. So you heard Dr. Wynand van Tonder speak earlier about the fact that commercial surrogacy is prohibited in our law. We cannot pay a surrogate mother in our country. It is actually a criminal offense. It's actually really unfortunate, in my opinion, that this is our regulation. It's not going to change anytime soon because we really do battle to find surrogates. We have so many infertile persons out there who desperately need to rely on the assistance of surrogates, yet we have the difficulty of being unable to source surrogate mothers because they get nothing out of it. Once we have procured a surrogate, the first step is to go and meet your surrogate. You may meet your surrogate online. You may meet your surrogate via a fertility clinic. You may meet your surrogate via a law firm. The first step in the process after that is to go and meet your surrogate in person. And you could have a very informal meeting with your surrogate. It's like meeting a new friend for the first time. See if you like her. We normally encourage you to have a video chat initially, and after that, if you're feeling at ease and you've got a relatively good gut feel about her, to go and meet her in person. That in-person first-time meeting is really important. It's important to ask her any pregnancy-related questions, any questions that are important to you as parents or as a single parent. You may want to ask her whether or not she would be prepared to carry twins, whether or not she wants to have a natural delivery, a cesarean section delivery, what her preferences are, how does she eat during her pregnancy. There's no question that's off limits. It's also important, if the surrogate is a single person, just to make sure that she's taking care with regards to her sexual lifestyle, because we need to be vigilant with regards to HIV infection during the pregnancy. After the meeting, if you and your partner have a good gut feel about your surrogate, the first step after that is to take your surrogate mother to your chosen fertility specialist, who will then scan your surrogate mother, take bloods on your surrogate mother, and make sure that she is medically fit to continue with the surrogacy process. After that's done, there's an intensive psychological evaluation which takes place on the surrogate mother. She has to undergo numerous screenings for various psychiatric illnesses because obviously we need to make sure that we've got an optimum candidate, both from a physiological point of view and from a mental point of view. And once that's completed, and more or less at the same time, you as parents would have to undergo psychosocial evaluation. That's where the psychologist and social worker possibly evaluates your living circumstances, your home environment, your relationship circumstances, because at the end of the day, the psychologist needs to give the judge a forensic report to show that you are fit and proper parents to bring a child into this world. More or less at the same time, we'll do police clearance checks on the parents, and we'll do police clearance checks on the surrogate mother and her partner. The reason why we do police clearance checks is, once again, to make sure that the parents haven't been convicted of any sexual offenses relating to children, and the same applies for your surrogate mother. In terms of your surrogate mother and your husband, we'd like to make sure that there's no drug trafficking charges. We'd like to make sure that there's no serious domestic violence aspects or anything serious which would preclude her from becoming a surrogate mother. And once all these checks and balances are in place, your attorney, such as myself, will sit down with you and draft what we call a surrogate motherhood agreement. Inside the surrogate motherhood agreement, we deal with all the terms and conditions. It's all the parents' obligations towards the surrogate mother, and then it's the surrogate's obligations towards the parents. And this has got to be the parents do not hold more power than the surrogate mother. It's got to be on an equilibrium. So we need to make sure that the parents don't control the surrogate, but at the same time that the surrogate is compliant with all her medical protocols, that she complies in terms of abstaining from alcohol, smoking, obviously drugs, that she can't take prescription or non-prescription painkillers without doctor's permission, etc. And once the surrogate motherhood agreement is settled, then we draft a whole lot of affidavits for the judge, which motivate why the parents are fit and proper parents. And we do, as Louis said, it is quite an invasive process. They do scrutinize a lot of things. Louis did mention that you go into your finances, but you must remember something. You don't need to show the court that you're millionaires. The judges are human beings at the end of the day. They're just trying to make sure that you are able to provide your child with the basic needs, housing, education, and more than anything, your time, emotional support, and love. And that's what they're invested in looking at. So once the affidavits and everything else are drafted, I will then lodge your application in court. And then we sit and wait for a judge to hear our case. And that normally, from the time that we submit a case to court, on average, we are heard between 3 weeks to 6 weeks. And then on the day, we would potentially, hopefully, get your court order. The judges have become incredibly strict with surrogacy applications. Unfortunately, it has evolved because it's fairly new law. Secondly, because they have this heavy duty to prevent child trafficking. And thirdly, because everything is done on paperwork, so that the judges don't often meet the parents, and they can't put a face to a name, and they need to satisfy themselves that this whole application is legitimate. So we might get further queries, and we attend to those queries, and then we get a high court order. So the phenomenon about this high court order is that it declares the parents to be the parents of the child before the child is even conceived. We have what we call in South African law preconception agreements. The rest of the world operates retrospectively. So the rest of the world operates on the basis where the surrogate would carry your baby, the baby would then be born, and once the baby is born, the parents would then approach the court and say, right, here we have a live baby, this is our baby, can we now become the parents of the child? And then the court would have a hearing with the surrogate, and the surrogate, generally internationally, may elect to keep the baby, which is highly problematic. So you can see that this preconception arrangement is actually ideal because everything is decided at the outset before any of our embryos are implanted into the uterus of the surrogate. We already have this high court order which declares the parents to be the legal parents of the child, which means that the surrogate cannot claim any rights, any responsibilities to the child whatsoever. The only time that this legal scenario changes with regards to claiming rights to the child is if the surrogate mother uses her own eggs. Dr. Van Tonder alluded to the fact earlier that we don't like to do what we call traditional surrogacy arrangements. These are arrangements where you have a surrogate mother that you potentially know and who is prepared to use her own eggs. In this case, the surrogate mother can always elect to keep the baby as her own. So you can imagine the nightmare that could evolve from a traditional surrogacy agreement. There's no need to do traditional surrogacies. There are various excellent egg donation agencies out there. Very easy to find an egg donor, so there's absolutely no reason why we need to resort to using the surrogate mom's own eggs. So the other thing that the High Court order does, it will then authorize your medical reproductive specialists to then create embryos, and they are at that point in time then allowed to take those embryos and transfer them into the uterus of your surrogate mother. Once the baby is born, a birth certificate is going to get issued in your names as the parents. It should be a fairly seamless process. Surrogacy has been around now for 12 years. Home Affairs is au fait with our surrogate high court applications, and there is a directive on our High Court order authorizing the Department of Home Affairs to issue a birth certificate in your name. So the day the baby is born, you will take your baby with you into the maternity ward. The surrogate mom will be moved into a general ward or a private ward outside of maternity, and you will go home as parents with your baby. So the legalities are all ticked. It's an excellent, seamless process in terms of the whole legal system in our country. The most difficult challenge, I'll say again, is finding surrogate mothers. We are looking everywhere all the time for surrogates. So that is going to be your biggest hurdle in this whole process, unfortunately. I'm just going to touch on a few of the legal aspects of surrogacy. Parents have to be living in South Africa, or they have to be domiciled in South Africa before you will qualify for the surrogacy process. International persons are not allowed to do surrogacy in South Africa. It is highly illegal. The judges are now on high alert. There are now three jurisdictions which are now taking this very seriously, making sure that international persons are no longer doing surrogacy in our country, because I think a couple of applications have slipped through the cracks where people have been living abroad and have kind of pulled the wool over the court's eyes, and Cape Town High Court, Johannesburg and Pretoria are now changing their whole systems with regards to surrogacy applications to make sure that this is not going to happen in the future. So unfortunately now when it comes to lodging of applications, it is going to start taking longer, because there's going to be an investigation with each and every surrogacy application on mainly the domicile aspect to make sure that the parents are in fact South African, living here, and that everything is done legitimately. Another part of our law is Section 294 of the Children's Act, which states that every child which is born through surrogacy in South Africa must have a genetic link to either of the parents, or if it is a single dad or a single mom, to that parent. It's actually quite an unfortunate law. We have gone to the Constitutional Court. I went to the Constitutional Court with some colleagues a couple of years ago to try and change this law, but unfortunately the Constitutional Court upheld this provision that there must be a genetic link requirement. So for those persons who are infertile in terms of unable to produce their own eggs and unable to produce viable sperm, unfortunately you will not qualify for surrogacy in South Africa, which is a real pity. I've spoken about commercial surrogacy. We don't pay our surrogate mothers. So if you do enter into a surrogate motherhood agreement with a surrogate, there can't be any under-the-counter payments. There can't be holiday homes. There can't be overseas holidays, cars purchased, homes, etc. It's actually a criminal offense. I don't think people realize how serious this actually is. I know you want to gift your surrogate. I always tell my clients that there's nothing wrong with providing small gifts of appreciation to your surrogate mother and just validate the importance and the gift of what she's giving you. But unfortunately, no large sums of money are allowed to exchange hands in this country. Persons with HIV will also qualify for surrogacy. I think Dr. Mohammed and I did the first HIV case in this country, I think, a couple of years ago. I can't recall. Very interesting case where we had a single dad who was HIV positive, and he wanted to use his own genetic material, and we took it to the Pretoria High Court and we were successful. It's quite interesting in the sense that since the advent of antiretroviral medications, there really is only a theoretical or an academic risk of the HIV virus being passed on to the surrogate mother or the child. So while we can't say that there's an absolute zero risk, we can say that the risk is of a theoretical nature only. So HIV-infected persons, provided that their viral load is undetectable, will potentially qualify for surrogacy in this country. And since then, we've done many HIV-positive parents where both are positive or where either of the parent is positive. And in fact, Tasneem and I, Dr. Mohammed and I did a case a couple of years ago where the intended father was positive and the intended mother was negative. The surrogate mother was positive. They had twins born, and the twins are HIV negative, which is quite incredible. So provided that all the medical protocols are put in place, and provided that all the motivations are done to the court, and medical evidence is put forward, and that all the doctors consistently carry out the ethical requirements when working with HIV-infected persons, there should be no reason for a judge to refuse such an application. So I would be available to take questions now or afterwards. I'm not going to delve into the law in detail, but just to say that generally, surrogacy applications, once you've mastered it, they are quite fluid in court. The more often I'm presenting cases in court, the more the judges are being educated about surrogacy. There is definitely no discrimination against gay parents, absolutely not. In fact, the reverse is possibly more true, and that is where you have a heterosexual couple. The onus on the woman is far more difficult to prove why she can't carry a baby than it is for your gay male parents, for example. In terms of our law, if you're an infertile woman, you have to show the court that you have a permanent and irreversible medical condition which necessitates the use of a surrogate mother, which means that we don't do Hollywood-style surrogacies where you are able to carry a pregnancy but would prefer to keep your figure and pay somebody else to do it. That is not legal in South Africa. And it requires a lot of medical evidence to be put forward at the end of the day to show the court that your medical condition is not going to be reversible via any further medical management or any other kind of medical intervention. Sometimes very difficult to prove. If you've got a hysterectomy, obviously if you've had a hysterectomy, that's classic and that's easy to prove. But many of our clients have suffered from many years of unexplained infertility. And that's quite difficult to convince a judge that she is never going to become pregnant in the future. Anyway, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer, but I think I'd like to stop my talk there because the legalities can go on forever and a day. The law's evolved over the last 12 years, and I could speak for as long as that. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take some questions now, or you can chat to me later.